So I've had an awful lot of messages from people feeling that they're failing quite a lot in what they're trying to do. They're not really getting the results and they're making a ton of mistakes. And that's weighing quite heavy on them. So let me try and address that. And also within this video, I want to go through about 10 or 11 gotchas that you may not be aware are happening within your production that you can help to fix some of this straight away. So the first thing to really understand is that nobody learns anything from getting stuff right. You are only ever going to learn from your mistakes. That's really how human beings have managed to get onto this amazing trajectory where we've got all of this technology in front of us, is that people messed up, readjusted, recalibrated, and then got stuff right. And it's incredibly important that you understand that whilst you're failing, you are learning. Now, there is a problem in any creative endeavor that involves technology, and that is we're trying to use two very different parts of our brain. The creative and emotional part of our brain, and the technical that is dealing with the computers and the software and all of the rest of it. And what can generally happen in my experience is that people get themselves into a bit of a mess with the technology. That creates a level of failure in their mind. Then this level of failure starts to play on the internal voice in your head that's going, you're not really very good at this. It basically is what causes imposter syndrome. And that then has a very detrimental effect on the ability to actually create. Because there's all sorts of reasons that creativity may actually come from you, but you're never really going to be at your best creatively if you're kind of being attacked emotionally by these voices in your head. So please take it from me that every single artist, every single producer in the world suffers from this kind of self-doubt. But here's the thing to always remember. If you're making mistakes, you are making progress. It doesn't matter how many tiny steps that you go forward, even if you have to take some steps back. Eventually, as long as you're on the right path and you are moving forward, and don't look back and think, oh my goodness, I'm not getting anywhere here. Just always keep your eyes forward. Now, the next thing to really understand is that the biggest problem I see people make with all of this is that they just dive straight in and try to make a full production. And if you think about analogies of how people get to the top of their game, let's use athletics. It's something I always like to do because there's multiple disciplines within forms of athletics, and it can be similar to all the different genres of music and also types of work that you can do within music. So for example, you can consider film and TV a little bit like the decathlon, for example. Think about how athletes actually get to their peak performance. They do that by training. And this is something that is often completely forgotten by the production community, is that people just jump in every single day to try and make a track, when actually what they should do is pull back for a bit and set aside a couple of hours to learn the systems that they're using. If you do this and actually learn the systems and just spend time investigating, you're really just in the technical side of your brain. The artistic side can just sort of sit there, simmer away, and what it'll do is be picking out bits of information going, oh, that's clever. Oh, I didn't realise you could do that. Oh, that's how that's done. And it's making mental notes all of its own. A lot of this is subconscious. But you basically concentrate on the technical and effectively go into training. So think of it how an athlete would actually train. Let's say if you look at, say, a football team, very rarely do you see them train and get better by playing a full game of football. They will practice individual parts of that game over and over and over and over again until as a team they're cohesive, and as individual athletes they're at their peak performance. That's what you need to do within the context of making music. So for example, programming drums. Well, that involves programming, sound design and engineering, as well as some artistic decisions. Now, if you leave all the artistic decisions to one side for a moment and concentrate on the technical, you could say set aside a few hours and actually work really, really hard. And the best way to do this is repetitively and quickly, so you're not thinking about it too much. Let me give you an example. Say we're talking about drum programming. Set yourself aside a couple of hours and then try to get 5 basic drum beats together in that time. Make sure you stop in between, and we'll come to this in a minute, but just rattle through it. Don't worry about the quality. Just see if you can get 5 done within a certain time frame. What's really important is that you give yourself a mental stopping point. In other words, you give yourself a target for when this has to be done. This is very good training for you as a producer to realize that there are deadlines. Most of them are self-imposed until you get to the point of success, and then the machine that comes along with success will actually create those deadlines for you. But for the time being, you create those constraints, but you're not worried about the output. Then it just becomes about the actual process. If you do 5 in a row, don't listen to them straight up. Give yourself a couple of days and then pull them back up. I guarantee you, 1 or 2 of them will really surprise you that you may have done something different. And the moment you gain a foothold in a piece of knowledge, your brain, by making the mistakes throughout those 5 processes, your brain will go, actually, we ended up this one thing. And you have then learnt that process, and it is always in your mental toolkit, and you can always refer to it. Then when you actually come to make your next production, you can build on all of these little bits of knowledge that you've got. But I promise you, you cannot be a great producer unless you dig in and actually try some of this. So investigate, practice, don't just try to produce. Okay, now I want to go through 10 or 11 gotchas that I find people make regularly as they're coming through this. And bearing in mind, I have made every single one of these. This is why I know about them. So all of these come from personal experience. The first one is learn to produce quietly. And I don't mean with the volume turned down or the master fader pulled down. What I mean is learn gain staging. If you don't know what that means, Google it and have a look. We actually created a video about using a system called K-metering to create an environment where the balance of your track, the working balance of your track has an actual target that will build in some headroom to it. Now, it's very easy when you first start producing to pull synths up and pull drum machines up, and nearly all of them, their presets provide stuff that some of them just clip. I mean, I always remember Massive from Native Instruments. Half of the presets seem to actually clip the output of a channel when you put it in. You can't have everything clipping, going to buses like master bus or subgroups, and then expect that to all work. You have to be aware that you have to pull stuff down. Now, one thing I would say when all of this, one really big tip, don't just pull the faders down. If you can, get your gain staging to a point where the faders are around 0 and you're using additional plugins, maybe the output gain of an EQ or even a utility plugin, to make sure that the channel's output are allowing you to have that particular element balanced with your faders at 0. The reason being, faders are logarithmic. They are not linear. They're not a straight line. They work on a curve like everything in audio. And the most useful point of a fader is around 0. I won't go any further than that because that's an entire video by itself. Okay, number 2, choice paralysis. Now this is an actual psychologically known and documented effect in the brain that when we are presented with a multitude of choices, we freeze. We just don't know what to do. And we've probably all experienced, I don't know anybody in making music that hasn't experienced this, where which plugin shall I use? And you've got this massive long list. That can cause you just to go into a form of paralysis. And going back to what I said about the technical affecting the emotional and creative side, if you're caught in this kind of choice paralysis, this can really affect your creative output, because suddenly there's this weird thing happening within the technical side of your brain. And then that affects it just affects your ability to create. Now, there is a very simple solution. Restrict yourself to the tools that you're using on a one given day. So pick a sampler, pick a synth, pick a drum processor, whether that be inbuilt, and pick, say, 4 or 5 serious tools within your plugin collection for processing audio. Pick 2 EQs, pick 2 compressors, 2 distortions, 2 choruses, whatever. Just limit yourself to a number of items and only use those for one session. 2 things will happen from that. A, choice paralysis gets removed instantly. B, you then start to hone your knowledge skills on those individual items. And maybe if you stick with that actual set of choices that you've made for a few sessions, you will then get better at every single one of those plugins that you've actually decided to use. So as your knowledge starts to come up, so does your competency. This helps all of the creative process and the technical process later on. That will free up your creativity. Okay, next one. Monitor your production at a variety of levels. Now, it's so easy for us to just creep up, and I am someone who is always monitored way too loud. But the reason I say a variety of levels is this is how your audio is going to be perceived later on. Now, there are ideals of monitoring at quite decent levels. This will stop your ears going into a self-protection mode and skewing your audio perception. There are also well-known and well-documented curves called the Fletcher-Munchen curves that basically suggest that as you increase volume level, the way that your ears perceive the music changes. Now, please just go and Google them. They're very, very well laid out on all sorts of papers and also just normal blog posts. And it will explain to you why, for example, you may, when you've got the volume turned up a lot, find that your mixes end up quite mid-range heavy. And also, if you monitor too quietly, you will actually make things a little bit too bassy. So, but one thing I would always say, particularly if you've got melodies and vocals involved, turn the monitors right down and listen back and see where things are fitting. You might find that you are missing something, particularly on these all-important melodic elements. I need to make one thing clear. The human brain is not polyphonic. It is a monophonic memory device, and this is why solo instruments and voices have such an emotional effect on us. And if you think about it, we can only, with our mouths, produce one note, which is why this monophonic system really exists in our brain. So those single note melodies, even if it's the leading melody of a chord sequence, that's what you remember. That's what you're whistling in your head when you're walking down the street. And that's what you need to concentrate on in your music. Okay. When we're talking about monitoring at a variety of levels, I also want to say that the most important thing, the most important control in your DAW setup is the stop button. And there is a very good reason for that. Our senses, all of them, are contrast based. And over a period of time, if you blast them with loud music, you will tire of the transients. Your ears will not be picking up the transients in the same way as they were that when you started the session. And this is where hitting stop and having a rest and giving your ears a rest can be absolutely vital. Now, I've got one thing to help me in here. This is an egg timer. It is a completely analog device. Do not use the timer on your phone because that can lead you to distractions on your phone, checking your Facebook and all the rest of it. Stick with something like this and just wind it up, give it 15 to 20 minutes, and then every time the thing goes off, have a rest. Now, 20 minutes is, I would say, absolutely vital. There is an awful lot of evidence to suggest that we can't really concentrate on one thing for more than 20 minutes at a go, unless we fall into the real zone, the flow state that's often described. But when you're doing something technical, you may not be able to get into that every single time. And breaking every 20 minutes will stop you getting distracted. One thing to really do as well is keep your phones way away from your studio. Actually put them in a different room or a different place in the room so you are not tempted to suddenly pick them up, because that will break your train of thought. Working for 20 minutes at a time and then having a break is actually part of a system called Pomodoro timing, which is used an awful lot by entrepreneurs and coders when they're actually building stuff, because it's, as I say, it's just known that 20 minutes is pretty much the limit of attention span of the human condition. Okay, the next one. Learn the lingo. And if you're not sure about the lingo, go and ask. So every single discipline or creative discipline that human beings create, and particularly technical, has a whole series of language that goes along with it. And sometimes you might be reading a technique or reading articles and you have a basic understanding of what the terminology means. But if you don't know exactly what the terminology means, you can get yourself into a real pickle. And this is where a little bit of investigation is really important. Knowledge is power. So if you don't know all of the different terminologies that you're seeing, even in magazine articles, go and find them all out. Now, I've had a few people saying that this can be quite a problem for them, and actually there's a degree of embarrassment. People don't want to say, look, I just don't know what backbeat means, for example. If that's the case, put them on the comments of this video and I will answer every single one of them. Please don't be in any way, shape or form shy. I didn't know half of this stuff, and there are still things that I'm being picked up on now and people are correcting me. That's 27 years in. There is absolutely no shame in this. If you don't understand what something is, ask. And if you can't find it on the internet, please just ask me here and I'll try to go into it. But learning the terminology will really help you expand your knowledge, because in manuals for synthesizers and all of this kind of stuff, you'll see this. What is a wavetable, for example? I bet you half the people using wavetable synths don't really understand the concept of a wavetable. Okay, next one. Don't go extreme with the processing. This is so important, I can't tell you. There are gallons of tutorials where people just utterly abusing absolutely every kind of plugin with, and you often see that the one that always makes me laugh is on EQ plugins. Something like the Pro Q3, when they do their advertising blurb, they've got these ridiculous EQ curves with all of these sharp points on it and things like that. 9 times out of 10, the best way to learn something from its basics is to use a quite simplified processing, or kind of not basically heavy processing. Don't go extreme at first. Find out exactly how the damn thing works with realistic settings. Now, I was very guilty of all of this, even throughout all of the big Freemasons days. I would push stuff enormously with EQs. You know, I'd go and do a 6 dB boost on an EQ without realizing that that was probably achievable with a little bit of balance and less actual EQ. Balance is the key to all of this, and throwing stuff into extremes becomes very useful when you're experienced. But to get the best out of all the tools, you first of all want to see what they're capable of in normal operation. Now, you can often go through some of the interviews that were made by professional mix engineers and producers and see that they're using more generalized settings. So check all of those out and then go and investigate those before you copy people doing ridiculous stuff on YouTube tutorials. Some of the things that I'm seeing of people approaching is so extreme that either it only works for a very, very narrow genre of music and shouldn't be replicated through others, or it's just there to kind of show off and get views on a video. So always be prepared to understand people's motivations. What are they actually putting the information out there? Are they putting it out there for shock value, likes and views and all the rest of it? Or are they really trying to bolster the community with good information? The moment you've learned how to use stuff properly, then you can learn how to break the rules and completely destroy audio deliberately. And that leads me on to a very important point, and that is distortion. Any kind of overdrive, distortion, heavy clipping, that kind of thing, will actually normally generate huge lumps of subsonic information that you may not be aware of. Now, believe it or not, I've only learnt this in the last few years, because distortion is basically now a mainstay within mixing. And I found it accidentally on a hi-hat of all things. I had a lovely clean hi-hat, really wanted to get some crunch out of it, so heavily distorted it, and then suddenly noticed all these subsonics were occurring underneath it. And this was only because I had an EQ put onto it that had a great analyzer. I think it was the Pro Q3. So obviously I immediately took it off, and then I started noticing it everywhere. And then I saw someone explain distortion. And I can't remember the video. If I can find it, I will put a link to it on there. But it was fascinating to see that nearly every form of overdrive and distortion will create huge lumps of subsonic. And what's important to understand, that these frequency bumps are so low that they may not be reproduced by your monitors. So unless you see them on an analyzer, you may not know they're there. So one thing I would always suggest, if you distort something and it's not meant to have huge whacks of subsonic on it, please go and check it afterwards, particularly your bass lines and your kicks, because obviously you want the useful sub information there, but not the really silly 20 to 10 hertz stuff. That's never going to be replicated, and it's going to eat up your headroom. So I can't say this to you enough. You distort anything, instantly put an EQ with an analyzer on it and see if it's created this lump of sub, and if it has, get rid of it. Okay, next one, and this is really important. Please stop trying to find magic or silver bullets. Stop trying to find one process that's going to get you a perfect bass end each time, for example. Every single track has its own personality, and as you bring these elements up with huge amounts of sub, as we do within modern productions, every single one is unique. There is not ever going to be one workflow or one technique that is going to solve that from you, and that goes for every single part of your production. By all means, have your processes that you're comfortable with, but don't expect them to work every single time. There is no silver bullet for any part of production. It's just pure slog, and you're going to have to be adaptable. But I see this all the time. People are trying to find, that's going to get me the loudest track, that's going to get me the best bass and that's going to get me the best vocal sound. No, listen to your material and then make a decision as to what that material is lacking and how you can get the best out of it. And with that comes my most important point. Manage your expectations. I think people expect, because I noticed there was a fashion on Instagram just recently of people going, this is how I made this track. And they edited some footage together of them pretending to play the piano part, pretending the vocals to go in one go, and then they smashed the master track out at the end. And it's like, yeah, aren't I great? It's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. What they never show you is the pain and the effort that went into making every single one of those tracks. Some tracks do come together nicely, but I guarantee you, every single one of those producers who has put one of those videos together on Instagram has pained themselves over the creation of that track. I always loved the story of Mark Ronson throwing up in restaurants during the creation of the Bruno Mars track, because he just realised the gravity of what he was doing. It was so tough. Apparently that was one of the reasons why they've never really repeated that style of production. It was just so painful to do. But hey, the result was incredible. It was one of the, I've seen entire pubs just get up and dance when it actually comes on. And that is because of the huge amount of hard work. Now, it's similar to the point I said before of not expecting a magic bullet, but you can't expect one process or one track that you do to elevate your production life into this amazing thing. It all happens incrementally. And it's a very similar process to finance. Compound interest is what has given us the modern economic model that we have. And compound interest means, 5% better, 5% more money this time, and then 5% additionally on top of that extra bit of money that you just had. And you roll that through the years, even a small 5% increase every single year can be incredibly important once you're 10 years in. Now think of it this way within your career. If you can get 5% better at making music every single year, within a few years, you're going to be absolutely exceptional and you will be at the level. There is no shortcut. Please stop looking for it and just 100% accept that it's going to take time and you will be happier.